When Ethan returned and opened the door, he froze at the sight. In the VIP boardroom of Quantum Dynamics, the 2 rows of high-end leather armchairs were occupied by the seasoned members of the board of directors. Their serious faces awaited the company's historic moment. Ethan sat there, dressed in a navy blue custom-made suit, flawless. He exuded an air of success and elegance that many admired. But I knew his mind was elsewhere. His gaze kept darting to the phone lying face down on the polished solid oak table, which vibrated repeatedly, shattering the tense silence of the merger signing ceremony. Ethan quickly glanced at the screen, and I also saw the message that appeared under his protege's name. "I'm so scared." Followed by, "The doctor said the cut is deep. It might leave a scar for life." A bitter, almost invisible smile traced my lips. I always knew the right timing. I knew that today was the most important day of my career. The day my beloved tech company, which I built from scratch, would be officially swallowed by my husband's conglomerate. Ethan turned to me. His voice was deep but held an urgency he couldn't hide. "Amelia, is the folder ready? Give it to me so I can sign it quickly and finish this. I need to leave immediately." I looked at the man I had loved for 10 years. The man who once promised to protect me for life was now eager to end everything between us, just to run to another woman's side because of a simple scratch. I calmly pushed the thick folder toward him. On the cover, written in bold, "Merger agreement and appointment of senior executives." "Review it carefully," I said in a strangely calm voice. "This is the final version, checked by the legal department, with some additional provisions regarding the rights of the founding partners." In truth, nestled between the thick pages of complex legal jargon was a special appendix I had drafted myself the night before, the asset division agreement and the mutual divorce application. I was betting on his negligence, his blind trust in my professional competence, and above all, the distraction Chloe was creating. Ethan took the fountain pen I offered. He didn't even bother to flip through the pages with his usual meticulousness. He went directly to the last page where the signature line was marked. "Everything is still as we agreed yesterday, right? You checked it thoroughly, didn't you?" he asked. I nodded, looking him straight in the eye. "Yes. I checked it meticulously. No provision is missing. You can sign with complete peace of mind." The nib of the pen glided swiftly across the paper, making a dry, crisp sound. Ethan's signature, elegant and decisive, ended my 3 years of dedication to the company and, simultaneously, our marriage that existed only in name. The moment he capped the pen, I felt a 1,000-pound weight lift from my chest, but at the same time, a chilling emptiness enveloped me. The pen he had just used was my gift to him on our first anniversary. On its body, the teasing phrase was still engraved, "Always together." He had used the witness of our love to sign the death warrant of our relationship. Immediately after signing, Ethan jumped up. He quickly buttoned his jacket. "My apologies, gentlemen," he said to the board members, with a feigned voice of regret. "I have an urgent family matter to attend to. Director Amelia will handle the rest." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out quickly. His tall figure disappeared behind the heavy wooden door without a single glance back. He had no idea that signature would cost him far more than he could ever imagine. I was left alone in the vast conference room. I picked up the folder and gently caressed the signature, its ink not yet completely dry. A single hot tear suddenly fell, blurring a corner of the divorce paper, but I quickly wiped it away. Crying at this moment was the most useless luxury. I stood up. I took the documents, and the coldness of a woman whose heart had died returned to my face. When I arrived home, Maria, our housekeeper, was surprised to see me so early. She quickly came to greet me. Her thin hand took the briefcase from me. "Ma'am, you're home so early," she asked with concern. "Where is Sir? Why do you look so pale? I'll prepare some chamomile tea for you." Maria's simple concern made my throat tighten. In this house, perhaps she was the only one who truly considered me part of the family. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Maria. Just a little tired. I want to rest. Please continue with your work, and please don't disturb me." I went straight to Ethan's office, which had access to the underground wine cellar. This was the place Ethan used to entertain important partners or to enjoy expensive wine with Chloe in my absence. He didn't know that behind the imposing oak shelf that reached the ceiling was a vault I had designed myself when we moved in. I slowly turned a bottle of Petrus, 1982. In the left corner, a small click echoed, and the secret door opened, revealing a tight space that contained a treasure. Inside, there was no wine, but stacks of safes. Here, I kept all of my mother's dowry, the emerald jewelry I had acquired at auctions during my business trips, and a bundle of bearer bonds accumulated from the profits of my private investments over 10 years. I was not the protected woman Ethan and his family thought I was. Before becoming his wife, I was a respected financial investor. But out of love for him, I agreed to stay in the background, hiding my brilliance to be a supportive wife behind the scenes. The total value of the assets in this room, according to a preliminary assessment, exceeded $100 million. A middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and a perfect black suit was already waiting for me there, as we had arranged. He was Mr. Dubois, an expert appraiser and luxury goods broker from Geneva. He greeted me with a respectful bow. Without asking why I was liquidating everything, Mr. Dubois put on white gloves and carefully examined each pink diamond under a jeweler's microscope. Silence filled the room. Only the sound of his typing and my steady breathing could be heard. After almost 2 hours, Mr. Dubois looked up and adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Hayes, everything is of the highest quality. We can proceed with the transfer to your Swiss account immediately, as per your request. However, the discount is slightly high due to the urgency of the transaction. I nodded firmly. Proceed. I need the money clean and fast. The discount is not a problem. I had no regrets about selling these things. They were material objects without a soul. What I regretted was my youth and the trust I had placed in the wrong person. When the bank transfer notification arrived on my phone, I felt as if a tumor had been removed from my soul. Mr. Dubois placed the velvet boxes into special briefcases, said goodbye with another bow, and left through a back door like a shadow. I was left alone in the empty vault. The yellow light reflected off the cold concrete walls. I slowly removed the wedding ring from my finger. The mark of the ring left a pale line on my skin. This ring, which I once cherished like my own life, which I thought was a circle of eternal connection, was now just a cold metal ring tying me to a tragedy. I left the ring on a small wooden table next to a note, with the new code for a safe that was now completely empty. A sharp pain suddenly hit my stomach, as if I were being stabbed from the inside with a dull knife. Perhaps it was the result of years of drinking alcohol instead of water to entertain clients and sign contracts for Ethan's company, combined with the intense stress of the past few days that caused my body to rebel. Weakly, I stumbled out of the cellar, clutching my stomach, cold sweat soaking my silk blouse. The enormous mansion was plunged into an eerie darkness and silence. Maria had probably retired to her room in the garden house. I tried to crawl towards the sofa in the living room, a wave of nausea rising in my throat, and then a warm, foul-smelling liquid erupted from my mouth, staining the cream-colored imported carpet red. In my daze, my wifely instinct pushed me to reach for the phone on the table and press speed dial number 1. It was Ethan's number, which I had set as an emergency contact for 10 years, with the naive hope that if anything happened to me, he would be the first to arrive. The phone rang and rang, a long, lonely echo, like a call for help in the middle of the ocean. On the third try, just as I thought I would pass out from the blood loss, someone answered. But instead of the concerned voice I expected, I only heard Ethan's irritated and sharp tone. Chloe was having a nightmare. She just fell back asleep. Can you please not call and disturb us right now? Whatever it is, we'll talk tomorrow morning. Before I could even mention help, the long, cold beep of the disconnected line severed the last thread connecting me to him. The phone fell from my hand and rolled onto the freezing floor. I curled up, tears mixing with the trace of blood at the corner of my lip. It turned out that in his eyes, the life of his wife of 10 years was not as important as the restless sleep of his mistress. I bit my lip, and with the little strength I had left, I dialed 911. I couldn't die. Not now, when my revenge was just beginning. I had to live. Live strong and healthy to see the day he would regret it. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its siren shattering the quiet night of the luxurious residential area. It took me to the emergency room of an international hospital, where the white lights and the smell of disinfectant made me even more nauseous. The on-duty doctor looked at me with pity and informed me that I was suffering from a severe gastric hemorrhage requiring an immediate endoscopy to stop the bleeding, and that I needed a relative's signature on the informed consent form. According to hospital policy, procedures with anesthesia and high risk required a relative's consent. It was an unbreakable rule to avoid possible future lawsuits. The young nurse looked around and asked, "Ma'am, do we need to call your relatives immediately? Your condition can't wait." Lying on the stretcher, staring at the white ceiling, a feeling of absolute loneliness enveloped my mind, more painful than the wound in my stomach. "I have no family," I whispered to the doctor, my voice weak but firm. "My husband is dead. Give me the papers. I'll sign them myself. I take full responsibility for my life." The doctor was stunned for a moment, perhaps having never seen a patient so clear-minded and self-sufficient in a life-or-death situation. In the end, faced with my determination and the severity of my condition, he gave me the consent form. With a trembling hand, I took the ballpoint pen and signed my name in the patient box with a shaky but determined script. The moment the tip of the pen left the paper, I knew I had just let go of the last trace of feeling for Ethan. From that second on, I would live only for myself. I woke up as the anesthesia wore off. The stomach pain persisted, but my mind was surprisingly clear. The only thing that greeted me was a bank message alerting me of a $2,000 charge for the hospital deposit. I smiled bitterly and took out the laptop I always carried in my bag, even in the ambulance. For me, at this moment, the computer was more trustworthy than a man's heart. I logged into the house's security camera system. It was a system I had set up myself with a private server that ran parallel to the one Ethan used, so even if he changed the password or turned off the cameras, I could always access it through a back door. The screen showed the image of our familiar mansion's living room. The wall clock showed 10 a.m. Ethan entered the house, but he wasn't alone. Next to him was Chloe. She was wearing a wine-red silk nightgown and naturally clung to his arm as if she were the owner and lady of the house. My heart didn't ache anymore. It had hardened. Now I saw them as two actors in a clumsy play. Chloe walked around my kitchen, opened the fridge for a bottle of water, and then asked Ethan in a sweet voice, "Honey, what's the Wi-Fi password for the house? I tried your birth date, and it didn't work." Ethan smiled as he loosened his tie and gently stroked her hair. "Ah, Amelia set that up. I think it's our wedding anniversary or something. I can't even remember anymore. I'll call a technician later to change it to something easier to remember. What do you think of your birth date?" Hearing that, my fingers froze on the keyboard. The wedding anniversary. The date I had cherished and used as a password to protect our home. For him, it was now just a series of meaningless numbers that needed to be erased. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I calmly opened the browser and accessed the mansion's router administration page. With a few simple commands, I changed the administrator password, kicked all connected devices off the network, and configured a firewall to block unauthorized access. I set the new Wi-Fi password, a long, random series of characters impossible to guess. Through the camera, I saw Chloe frown as her phone lost connection, while Ethan fiddled with the router, not understanding why the signal light had turned red. But I didn't stop there. Taking advantage of the fact that Ethan's work computer at home was on and connected to the network, I activated a covert monitoring software I had installed long ago to prevent security risks in the company. This program would record all key press history, take periodic screenshots, and send a report to my cloud server. I suspected that Chloe, with her practicality, wanted more than just his love. What she was really after was his money and the group's trade secrets. The next day, I turned my hospital room into a campaign office. Although the doctor ordered me to rest, I knew I had no time for weakness. On the computer screen, I opened two windows simultaneously. On one side, the flashing panel of the stock market with its green and red lights. On the other, the live broadcast of the Quantum Dynamics shareholders meeting. Today was the first meeting after the merger. I was supposed to occupy the position of Vice President of Technology, but that seat was now vacant. Through the camera, I saw an elderly shareholder speak up. "Why don't we see Mrs. Hayes today? The integration of the systems of both companies is a very complex matter. We need her expert opinion." Ethan, standing at the podium with his usual imposing demeanor, adjusted the microphone and lied without blinking. "Gentlemen, my wife is on an unexpected business trip abroad, exploring new markets for our next tech products. She apologizes for her absence and has given me full authority to make all decisions." I smiled faintly. The orange juice I was holding suddenly tasted bitter. His lie was so smooth that if I weren't lying here with an IV in my arm, I would have believed he was traveling the world myself. I contacted my trusted stockbroker and instructed him to immediately sell all the minority shares I held in the subsidiary companies. These were personal investments, not part of the common assets to be divided. I wanted to raise as much cash as possible. "Amelia, it's not a good idea to sell now. The market is in the middle of a correction," he warned in a concerned message. "Sell everything," I typed back quickly. "At any price. I need liquidity. Now. I don't care if I lose a small percentage. What I need is to cut any financial tie that binds me to Ethan's ecosystem." At that moment, I received a message from Bella, my former loyal assistant, who still worked at the company. She sent me a photo of a new appointment circular posted on the internal notice board. I enlarged the image, and one sentence made my hair stand on end. "Miss Chloe Bernard is appointed as Director of Communications and Brand for the group." So this was it. This was why Ethan was in such a hurry for me to sign the merger. He had paved the way for his mistress to enter the executive team, a position I myself had held at the beginning of the company to save costs. I had spent countless nights developing strategies, begging every journalist to write an article to promote the company, and now, Chloe just walked in and sat in my job as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I looked at her radiant face in the employee photo, her eyes shining with an air of victory. "Fine, if you want to sit in a high position, I'll let you. But remember, the higher you climb, the harder the fall." I closed the computer and removed the IV. Although the saline bag was still half full, a little blood trickled out and then stopped. Just like the pain in my heart, now cauterized by a dose of clear-eyed revenge. Today was my 30th birthday. In other years, no matter how busy I was, I always prepared a special dinner, set out fresh flowers, and waited for Ethan to arrive to cut the cake. But this year, I was celebrating my new year of life in a solitary cafe on a corner, directly across from a notary public's office. My phone vibrated. It wasn't a greeting from my husband, but an automatic reminder from Facebook. "Today is your birthday. Share the moment." I swiped the screen, and the first thing I saw was a photo posted a minute ago on a company employee's profile. The picture showed a grand party at one of the city's most luxurious seafood restaurants. The caption read, "Celebrating the appointment of our new boss, Chloe, to Quantum Dynamics in style." In the center of the photo, Ethan raised a glass of wine with a broad smile, while his other arm was wrapped openly around Chloe's waist. But the detail that made my heart clench was not the embrace, but the tie he was wearing. It was a silk tie of a deep cobalt blue, with a discreet pattern that I had spent a month ordering from Italy as a gift for his birthday last month. He had said he loved it and promised to wear it only on the most special occasions. It turned out his special occasion was the day he celebrated his mistress, while his wife's birthday was discarded like a used napkin. I turned off the phone and looked at the man sitting across from me. He was David, a well-known real estate agent who was helping me manage the sale of my penthouse in the Upper East Side. It was a private property I bought with my savings before I got married. The place where I planned to bring my parents from the countryside to grow old. David pushed a folder toward me and said with regret, "Amelia, have you really thought this through? This apartment is in a prime location with a river view. If we sell it in a hurry, we'll have to accept a price 15% below market value. Can't you wait a few months?" I watched the rush of people on the street through the glass and shook my head with determination. "I can't wait, David. I need the money. I'll accept 15% or 20%, whatever it takes, as long as the paperwork is done this week and the money is in my account before Friday." David was surprised, probably thinking I was bankrupt or had a serious problem. He didn't know that I was selling the last anchors tying me to this city. I was preparing myself for a departure with no return. I took the pen and signed the power of sale. My handwriting was now steadier than when I signed the fake divorce agreement. I thought I would be sad to sell the house that held so many of my childhood dreams, but surprisingly, I felt lighter. Money, houses, in the end, they are just material possessions. When a person's heart changes, a house, even if made of gold, is nothing but four cold walls. I stood up, shook David's hand, and walked out. The afternoon sun hit me, making me squint. I told myself, "Happy birthday, Amelia. The best gift you've given yourself this year is your freedom." The court summons arrived on an afternoon of heavy rain, 2 days after I was discharged from the hospital. The courier, dressed in a blue raincoat, left a trail of water on the shiny floor tiles, stains like wounds that hadn't yet closed. I held the brown envelope, feeling a weight that came not from the paper but from the word mediation. It was a mandatory process in contentious divorces or those with property disputes. But for me, it felt like a final stop to observe the ruins of 10 years of my life. My phone rang. It was Ethan. He had received a similar notice. His voice on the other end was irritated and complaining. The background noise indicated he wasn't in the office. "Amelia, what is this? Why is the court sending us a summons for a mediation hearing? I thought we agreed to wait until the merger was finalized before dealing with this. Withdraw the petition. Don't create more problems now when the company needs a stable image." Calmly, I held the phone with my shoulder while preparing a hot tea to combat the cold of the rain. "It's a mandatory legal procedure. I can't withdraw it," I replied, my voice as light as the wind. "Find a space in your schedule. It's just one morning. Or are you afraid to face me?" There was a silence on the other end, and then Ethan sighed. "Fine. Let's meet tomorrow at the corner cafe near the courthouse. I want to talk to you clearly before we go in." The corner cafe was hidden in a quiet alley, away from the city's noise. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in a corner where I could watch the rain fall. Ethan arrived late, looking rushed, his tie slightly crooked. He probably came from a meeting or a party. He sat down, ordered a black coffee with no sugar as usual, and looked at me with a mixture of scrutiny and exhaustion. "Look, I'm swamped with work. The company just merged. I have a million things to do. If you can't help, at least don't add to the problems." I didn't argue. I just pushed a thin folder toward him. It wasn't the divorce petition, but photocopies of some unusual marketing expenses from the last quarter, managed by Chloe. The amounts weren't huge, a few $100,000 in discrepancies, but it was a clear sign of fraud. "I don't want to be a problem," I said with the utmost sincerity. "Before we go to court, I wanted you to see this. These are the numbers from the communications department. There's a significant discrepancy between the budgets and the actual costs. You should check on your new hire." Ethan took the papers, glanced at them, and threw them on the table with a bitter laugh. "Here we go again. You're so jealous you're becoming delusional, Amelia. Chloe just got promoted, and because you can't accept it, you're trying to find fault with her, right? This amount is nothing compared to the group's revenue. Don't be so petty. You're losing your class." His words were like cold water dousing the last embers of love I had left for him. He trusted the feigned innocence of his mistress more than the irrefutable numbers from the woman who, for 10 years, had been the guardian of his finances. I picked up the papers, carefully folded them into 4, and put them in my bag. I looked him straight in the eyes that once made my heart race, and where I now saw only a vast emptiness. "All right, Ethan. Let's pretend I said nothing. Stay with your trust. Let's go to court. It's time." I stood up, paid for our drinks, and walked out first, leaving him sitting there, arrogantly believing he had everything under control, not knowing that he was, in fact, on the brink of collapse. It was a weekend night, and the city glittered like a galaxy spread on the ground. Ethan called me. His tone was more of a command than an invitation. "Tonight is the Tech Entrepreneurs Foundation Charity Gala. Get ready. Wear something elegant. I don't want people saying I'm mistreating my wife now that the company is thriving. The car will pick you up at 7. He needed me as an ornament, A screen to hide the cracks of a broken marriage and to reassure investors and partners. I stood in front of the wardrobe, my fingers sliding over the expensive evening gowns Ethan had bought on a few occasions, merely as a formality. In the end, I chose a long black velvet dress with a classic and discreet cut that I had bought 3 years ago. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't glamorous, but it conveyed a solemn and dignified elegance, just like my mood. I pulled my hair into a high bun, applied a touch of dark red lipstick, and wore no jewelry except for my old watch with a leather strap. Upon entering the dazzling ballroom, I immediately felt the curious gazes focused on me. Ethan approached. He was wearing a perfect black tuxedo, but his gaze faltered when he saw my simple attire. Before he could speak, a strong perfume enveloped us. Chloe appeared from behind him, holding his arm naturally, as if she were the hostess of the party. Chloe was wearing a red mermaid-cut dress with a daring slit that showed off her long legs. But what caught my attention most was not her dazzling beauty, but the diamond set she wore around her neck. It was the Night Dew collection, an exclusive design I had long dreamed of and had shown Ethan in a catalog for our wedding anniversary last year. At the time, he said it was too expensive and unnecessary. Now, it rested proudly on his mistress's neck. Chloe looked at me, her smile sweet, but her eyes sharp as knives. "Amelia, you look so simple tonight. Maybe with all the family matters, you haven't had time to prepare, have you? Ethan told me you haven't been feeling well lately. You should rest more. Let me handle the social relations." I smiled, a perfect business smile I had honed over many years. "Thank you for your concern, Chloe," I replied, my voice calm but loud enough for those around us to hear. "In my opinion, a woman's class lies in her intelligence and demeanor, not in some shiny stones she wears. Besides, jewelry is like the people who wear it. If it doesn't suit them, instead of adding elegance, it just looks vulgar." Chloe was speechless, her face flushing with anger, but she didn't dare make a scene in front of so many people. I moved away from them, took a glass of wine, and went to a secluded corner of the balcony. There, an older man with a distinguished look was waiting for me. He was Arthur, a former financial partner who was discreetly helping me move my capital abroad. We clinked our glasses. "Everything is ready," he said in a whisper, almost inaudible. "The $100 million have been transferred to the investment fund under the guise of an angel investor. The records are clean. No one can trace the origin of the money back to you." I nodded, sipping the bitter wine. While Ethan and Chloe reveled in their fleeting glory, I was quietly setting the biggest financial trap of my life. For them, this party was a showcase of power. For me, it was the place where I officially stepped out from the shadow of a submissive wife to become a chess player. I was organizing my visa paperwork in the home office when my phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed Ethan's name. It was 11 p.m., a time when he was usually out enjoying himself with Chloe or at a business dinner. I answered, and before I could speak, his voice, frantic with fear, echoed on the other end. "Amelia, help me. The group's main server has been attacked. All transaction data is encrypted. Customers are calling non-stop to complain. Get into the system and see what you can do. Please. Where is your new technical team? Where is the IT director you hired with $1 million salary? They're just staring at the screen like nothing's happening," he shouted desperately. Chloe said they were her acquaintances. But now that there's a problem, it turns out they're just charlatans. Help me. Now. Please. If we don't fix this, Quantum Dynamics shares will be worthless tomorrow. I sighed. After all, that company was also part of my creation. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the familiar keyboard, and a black screen with green lines of code appeared. Just as I suspected, it was a large-scale DDoS attack, exploiting a basic security vulnerability created by the amateur team in their attempt to change the system architecture I had designed. After 15 minutes, the traffic graph on the screen began to stabilize. On the other end of the line, I heard Ethan's sigh of relief and the admiring whispers of his employees. "It's fixed. The system is back to normal," I said without taking my hands off the keyboard. "But this is just a temporary solution. That security layer needs a complete rewrite, protection from the ground up. Thank you, Amelia." I knew I could count on you, Ethan said, his usual arrogance returning. I'll tell accounting to transfer an extraordinary bonus to you. I smiled bitterly. He still thought everything could be bought with money. While he celebrated averting disaster, I quietly typed a short line of code into the system's core. It wasn't a destructive virus, but a sophisticated backdoor. It was like a master key that would give me access to and allow me to retrieve any sensitive data from the group at any time, including internal chats or suspicious transactions they might try to hide. The next day, I went to the group's headquarters, not to receive thanks or a bonus, but to collect the last traces of my presence there. I went straight to my old office on the 50th floor. The familiar wooden door now had a new, shiny plaque. Chloe Bernard, Director of Communications. I entered. A sweet scent of perfume filled my nose, replacing the old smell of fresh coffee. The room had been completely transformed. The elegant brown leather sofa had been replaced by a pastel pink velvet one in terribly poor taste. My bookshelves, once filled with technical manuals, were now empty, replaced by fashion magazines and girlish decorative trinkets. In a corner, I saw several stacked cardboard boxes. I approached. Inside were my awards, the trophies, recognizing me as an outstanding tech leader, and the picture frames of Ethan and me at the company's beginning, all thrown in there like trash waiting to be discarded. I didn't feel anger, only a sense of irony. Chloe could take the office, the position, but she could never take my brain or my worth. I hadn't come for those worthless memories. I went straight to the safe hidden behind a landscape painting, the only thing Chloe hadn't touched because she didn't know the combination. I entered the code. The door swung open, and inside were the hard drives with the original source code of our main software, along with the intellectual property registration documents in my name. These were the real assets, the weapon I would use for the final blow. I put the hard drives and documents in my bag and turned to leave. As I walked out into the hallway, I ran into Ethan and Chloe. She, clinging to his arm, was startled to see me coming out of her office. "Well, Amelia, what are you doing in my office? You didn't take anything of mine, did you?" Ethan looked at the bag in my hand and frowned. "You came to get your things? Why didn't you just tell administration to get them for you? You didn't need to bother." I looked at both of them, my gaze lingering on Chloe's hand, clutching my husband's arm as if afraid he'd be stolen. I adjusted the collar of my dress and replied, articulating each word clearly. "I came to get what is mine, things that all your money could never buy. As for this office and this position, you can keep them. I'm leaving to make space for someone more deserving, or perhaps for someone better suited to the mediocrity of this place." With that, I walked straight to the elevator, leaving behind Chloe's stunned face and Ethan's thoughtful, confused gaze. That weekend, Ethan's mother, Isabella, arrived from upstate without notice. She called me when she was already at the mansion's gate, carrying chicken, rice, and fruits from her garden, all things she knew I loved. I was at my old penthouse, finalizing the sale, and when I heard her voice, I felt a knot in my stomach. She was a simple woman who had worked hard her whole life for her family and loved me dearly. She treated me like a daughter, always saving the best for me. I didn't have the heart to tell her the bitter truth. Not yet. Ethan called me immediately, his tone pleading, a rarity for him. "Amelia, can you please come home for a bit? My mom's here, and she doesn't know anything about us. For her sake, I'm asking you to pretend we're a happy couple for these few days. I'm begging you." I was silent for a long time, looking at the gray sky through the window, and sighed. "All right." I drove back to the mansion. Isabella ran to hug me when she saw me, her wrinkled face lit up with a smile. She took my hand, a hand that was thick and warm, giving me a familiar warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "Amelia, child, you're so thin. You work too much. I brought you a chicken from the farm. Tonight, I'll make you some soup to build up your strength." I held back my tears and hugged her back. "Thank you, Mom. I've missed your soup so much." Dinner proceeded in a tense atmosphere that only Isabella didn't sense. She kept serving food to Ethan and me, telling anecdotes from her town. Ethan tried to play the part of a caring husband, serving me the best piece of chicken but avoiding my gaze. Suddenly, Maria, the housekeeper, spoke without thinking. "You're such a good cook, Mrs. Isabella." "No wonder, miss. Chloe says your food is her favorite whenever she eats here." The atmosphere turned icy. Isabella put down her cutlery and looked first at Maria and then at Ethan. "Who is Chloe? Why does she come here to eat so often?" Ethan turned pale and started to stammer, trying to make an excuse, but I beat him to it, though I felt a pang in my heart. "Oh, Chloe is a new colleague of Ethan's. Mom, she's all alone in the city and often has to work overtime with him, so sometimes she stops by for a meal so she doesn't have to eat alone." Isabella looked at me doubtfully but nodded, and dinner continued. That night, I made a bed on the living room floor, using the excuse that my back hurt and I preferred a firm surface. Ethan tried to come in to talk, but I locked the door. He stayed on the other side for a few moments, his shadow long and cold under the door. Lying in the dark, I heard him sigh and wondered if there was a hint of regret in it, or just relief at having deceived his mother. During the days Isabella stayed, I had to live a double life. By day, I was the perfect, happy daughter-in-law. By night, I became a digital ghost, quietly investigating my husband. Thanks to the monitoring software I had installed, I could track all his computer activity. Chloe was smart. She didn't use the company email for suspicious matters but an encrypted chat app. But she didn't know that everything was being recorded by the keylogger, even the self-destructing messages. On the third night, when everyone was asleep, I opened my laptop and received the system report. A conversation appeared between Chloe and an anonymous user called Accounting Head. They were discussing the processing of invoices for a multi-million-dollar communications project they had just signed with a company called Soul Media. I quickly looked up information on Soul Media. It was a phantom company created just 3 months ago, with an office at a fake address on the outskirts of the city, and the sole administrator was Chloe's cousin. In the chat, Chloe instructed, "Process the 50% down payment. The partner is family, no problem. The official invoices will be issued after Ethan approves the investment. You just need to release the funds." She attached a screenshot of a $5 million transfer made that night. I froze at her audacity. $5 million. The sweat and effort of so many employees, and she was dispersing it as if taking money from her own pocket. I saved all the evidence. The chat, the transfer order, the phantom company's documents. I thought about reporting her immediately but stopped myself. $5 million wasn't enough to change Ethan's mind. He would blame me again, saying it was a procedural error or that he had trusted her too much. I needed a larger amount, a more devastating blow to completely shatter his blind faith. And above all, I wanted him to taste the bitterness of betrayal from the person he trusted most, a pain as intense as the one he gave me. Only 10 days remained before the court's mediation period ended. Ethan's mother had returned to her town, carrying the false peace we had constructed. Ethan's company began to face liquidity problems. The exorbitant expenses on Chloe's phantom projects, combined with credit restrictions from banks wary of the new management, put Quantum Dynamics in a difficult situation. Employees started complaining about delayed salaries, and suppliers demanded payment. Ethan sought funding everywhere but received only polite rejections. When he was at his most desperate, a glimmer of hope appeared. A venture capital fund based in Switzerland, through a prestigious law firm in New York, expressed interest in investing $50 million in the main tech project Ethan had developed. It was a lifeline in the middle of a fire. An energized Ethan organized a meeting with the fund's legal representative. At the meeting, the lawyer presented an investment contract with very strict provisions. "Mr. Hayes, my client, is an angel investor who prefers to remain anonymous. He greatly values the tech potential of quantum dynamics, but also demands complete financial transparency. The $50 million will be provided, but you must sign a commitment assuming unlimited personal liability for the use of the funds. If any irregularity or malversation is discovered, you will have to repay double the amount and surrender full control of the company to the fund." Ethan, blinded by the need for capital and overconfident, signed without hesitation. He couldn't imagine that the generous angel investor was me, the wife he scorned. In fact, that $50 million came from the sale of the jewelry he himself had given me and the penthouse that held my dreams. I was using my own money to buy a stake in my husband's company, but under a different name and from a position of power. When I saw Ethan's signature on the scanned contract the lawyer sent me, I felt no joy, only a profound sadness. He was willing to sell his soul to a stranger, to bow before someone else's money, but he couldn't value the woman who had been with him through thick and thin for so many years. Fine. If you love money so much, I will use money to teach you an unforgettable lesson about the value of loyalty. A sudden storm hit New York City, turning the I-95 into a white, blurry river. I was heading back in my car from my last meeting with the investment fund's lawyer when the car suddenly stopped. The engine shuddered and died in the middle of the highway. I tried to start it several times, but it was useless. The control panel showed a failure due to engine overheating. Sitting in the car, watching the raindrops crawl down the windshield, I felt completely helpless. Around me, trucks sped past, splashing water. The sound of horns mixed with the rain drumming on the roof, like a frantic beat against my chest. I picked up the phone and, out of old habit, called Ethan, despite our Cold War, despite the divorce petition already in court. It rang once, twice, and then went to voicemail. I called again. This time it was busy. Maybe he was in a meeting, or doing something more important than ensuring my safety. 10 minutes later, while waiting for the tow truck, my phone vibrated. It wasn't a message from Ethan, but a notification from a new public post by Chloe on social media. In the photo, Ethan was holding a hairdryer, carefully drying each strand of her damp hair. The background was the living room of Chloe's apartment, with its warm lighting and comfortable cream-colored sofa. The caption was short but incredibly painful. On a bad weather day like this, I'm so lucky to have you to bring the sun and dry my hair. I looked at the picture, and then at the dark curtain of rain outside my car. At the cold window, two worlds in stark contrast. There, he was caring for his mistress with all the love in the world, as if she were a treasure. Here, his wife of 10 years was stranded alone on a highway, shivering with fear and cold. It turned out his line was busy because he was busy loving someone else. I didn't cry. Perhaps my tears had already run dry. After so much pain, I turned off the phone and threw it onto the passenger seat. The tow truck arrived and took the car. I returned home in a taxi, my soul as calm as a lake after a storm. I opened a flight app and bought a ticket on the first flight to Europe the next morning. I wouldn't wait the 2 days I had planned. I didn't want to breathe the same air of betrayal for another second. My last day in the city dawned with a brilliant sun. I woke up early, dressed in simple clothes, and took a taxi to a quiet memorial park outside the city. My parents' memorial plaque was set peacefully under an old dogwood tree, its blossoms in full bloom. I lit a candle. The smoke rising towards the sky, carrying the secrets of a daughter far from home. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't keep a home as you had hoped. I tried with all my strength. I loved with all my heart, but fate is fragile, and men's hearts are fickle. I stayed there for a long time, telling them about my decision to leave, my plans for the future, not to complain, but to let them know that their daughter was still strong. The wind whispered through the leaves, like my mother's invisible hand stroking my hair. I gave a final bow and left, feeling as if a weight had been lifted. Back home, I called Maria into a separate room. She looked at me with concern, as if she sensed something was about to happen. Maria, here is your salary for this month and an additional fund for your retirement, and this passbook, keep it, in case you ever need it. I'm leaving for a business trip, very far away, and it will likely be a long time before I return. Starting tomorrow, pack your things and go back to your family upstate. Don't stay here. Maria took the envelope, her hands trembling, and tears welled up in her wrinkled eyes. Ma'am, where are you going? This sounds like a farewell. You're not coming back, are you? I held her thin hand and smiled to calm her. I'm going to find a new life, Maria. Don't worry about me. I can take care of myself. You go back home and take good care of yourself. She hugged me, crying like a mother saying goodbye to her child. In this big, cold house, her warm affection was the only thing that pained me to leave behind. In the afternoon, I went to the bank and canceled all the supplementary credit cards I had taken out for Ethan. The employee was surprised to see me canceling high-end cards one by one, but I just smiled. Cutting the financial ties was the final step in severing the relationship. I kept receiving messages from Ethan. "I'm late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. At the end of the month, I'll take you on a trip to make it up to you. Okay, don't be so angry. It makes you look ugly." He still thought my silence of the past few days was just a woman's simple tantrum, convinced that I would always be there, waiting for his leftover affection. He didn't know that an angry woman is a woman who still loves. A woman who is completely silent is a woman preparing to leave. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. When the mansion was still cloaked in night, I woke up. The silence was so profound. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. I went to the kitchen, lit the stove, and the familiar smell of the blue flame filled the air. I took out the ingredients I had prepared the night before and started cooking his favorite dish, a slow-cooked pot roast. The sound of the knife on the chopping board, the aroma of herbs, vegetables, and beef broth filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of the past when our love was still strong. This was the last breakfast I would prepare for him, a ritual to say goodbye to 10 years of marriage. When the warm plate was set on the table, the sun was beginning to rise. I went back to the office and left 3 things on his oak desk. First, a bright red USB drive containing the complete source code of the new system. I had stayed up nights perfecting a farewell gift worth an intellectual fortune. Next to it, a thick folder with the irrefutable evidence of Chloe's embezzlement and the receipt for the $50 million transfer I had secretly used to save his company. Finally, I took off my wedding ring and left it next to the house keys. The diamond reflected the morning light, brilliant but cold and lifeless. I didn't leave a long letter, only a small yellow sticky note with 2 words, "Goodbye." Any more words at this point were superfluous. I took the small suitcase that was ready by the door and glanced at the house one last time. Every corner, every piece of furniture bore the mark of my care, but now they felt alien to me, as if they had never been mine. I didn't go into the bedroom to see Ethan one last time, afraid that weakness might stop me. I walked out. The sound of the suitcase wheels on the patio tiles was dry and sharp. The heavy iron gate closed behind me with a creak, separating me from my past. A taxi was waiting. I got in and told the driver, "To JFK International Airport, please. International Terminal." The car moved forward, leaving the white mansion submerged in a false stream of peace. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. Ahead of me stretched a vast sky, freedom, and a new life waiting for me. A life without betrayal or lies. JFK International Airport was bustling with people. Flight announcements echoed repeatedly, but to me, it was all white noise. I could only hear the beating of my own heart. Sitting in the VIP lounge, the coffee on the table had gone cold, without me even taking a sip. My eyes were fixed on my phone screen, following the signals of the smart home system. Exactly 7:30 a.m. The phone notified me that the front door sensor had been activated. Ethan was up. I could imagine him coming down the stairs, smelling the aroma of the pot roast and smiling, thinking his wife was no longer angry. He would sit at the table, call for me, but no one would answer. The unusual silence of the house would make him anxious. 7:45 a.m. Another notification. USB device connected. My heart raced. He had entered the office. He had seen what I left for him. At that moment, he was surely holding the folder, his fingers trembling as he turned the pages. He would see the financial investigation report exposing his little protege. He would see the embezzled amounts I had circled in red. And the biggest shock would come upon seeing the $50 million transfer receipt from the Swiss investment fund with the real beneficiary's name behind the legal facade, mine, Amelia de los Santos. At 8 a.m., my phone started ringing incessantly. It was Ethan. My husband's name, which I still hadn't changed, lit up the screen. I looked at it, smiled bitterly, and pressed the decline button. I immediately removed the SIM card, snapped it in 2, and threw it in the trash, a final act to cut off all communication. Simultaneously, on my tablet, a notification appeared that the administrator account had been disconnected from the system. It was a line of code I had programmed to activate 15 minutes after he connected the USB. I had removed my own access to the group's system and, At the same time, sent an automated email to all board members with the subject, Report on Irregularities and Technology Transfer. Passengers on the flight to Singapore, please proceed to Gate 18. The speaker's voice brought me back to reality. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and dragged my suitcase towards the boarding gate. I imagined Ethan rushing out of the house like a madman, racing against time to find me. But it was too late. As the plane took off, piercing through the white clouds towards the blue sky, I took one last look at the city, shrinking beneath my feet. Down there, the storm I had created was just beginning to break over the traders, and I was flying towards peace. When he read the 2 words on the yellow note, Ethan rushed out of the house like a madman, without changing out of his pajamas, his leather shoes unlaced. He got into the car and slammed the accelerator with all his might. His luxury vehicle weaved through the dense rush-hour traffic of New York City as if trying to break through time itself to recover something already lost. He called my number repeatedly, but only received the cold silence of the operator. The number you have called is not available. It was the first time in 10 years of our relationship that I had rejected him, that I had cut him out of my life in such a clear and brutal way. He arrived at JFK as the status of the flight to Singapore changed to a final, red departed. He parked the car haphazardly in the departures area and ran inside, his eyes red, searching for a familiar figure in the sea of people. He ran from one counter to another, grabbing the arms of security guards and ground staff to ask about a woman named Amelia. But an airport that sees thousands of people pass through every day doesn't remember the face of a single woman who left quietly. The airport's noise was a brutal contrast to Ethan's internal collapse. He stood paralyzed in the middle of the international terminal, still clutching the red USB drive. He looked at the departure boards, at the planes taking off one by one, carrying away the woman he had always taken for granted, whose unconditional support he thought would never leave. In that moment, he understood the cost of his indifference. The money, the status, the power of a CEO of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate were useless against the distance and the determination of a heart that had grown cold. They say he collapsed onto the cold tile floor of the airport, oblivious to the curious and pitying glances. The man who had always walked with his head held high, full of pride, was now hunched over, his shoulders shaking. Perhaps in that moment, he realized he had lost the most valuable thing. Not a brilliant tech director, but the only person in the world who loved him unconditionally. The only one willing to support him when everyone else had turned their backs. But regret, no matter how painful, cannot turn back time. Ethan returned to the group's headquarters after 10 a.m. His disheveled and lost appearance shocked the receptionist, but no one dared to ask. He entered his office, slammed the door, and isolated himself from the world. In the eerie silence, he tremblingly plugged the red USB drive into the computer. It was the last key I had left him to open the door to a truth he had deliberately ignored. A folder opened automatically. The first file was not the source code, but a video compiled from the house's security cameras and from the hidden camera on his own work computer. What he saw made his breath catch. Images of Chloe, his innocent and fragile protege, sitting in front of his computer late at night, working with surprising skill, copying client databases, photographing bidding plans, and sending them to an unknown email. Her face in the video had no trace of innocence. Instead, it showed calculation, cunning, and a smile of contempt as she glanced at our wedding photo on his desk. The next file was an audio recording of Chloe's calls to a competitor, haggling over the price of the stolen data from Quantum Dynamics. The sweet voice that had so captivated him was now sharp, reeking of money and betrayal. She called him a puppet, a gold mine she planned to exploit before leaving him. I can imagine Ethan's face at that moment, shifting from disbelief to intense fury, the veins on his forehead bulging. His blind trust was shattered by the harsh reality. But what hurt him most was the content of the last file on the USB drive. The updated source code of the main system. 3 years of my life I had dedicated, countless nights writing every line, optimizing every algorithm, just for the perfect functioning of his company. In the code's notes, instead of technical comments, I had left detailed instructions, like a wife giving recommendations to her husband before a long trip. This module, remember to update it every month. I've strengthened the security here. Don't share the password with anyone. Every sentence was an act of care and concern. Ethan buried his head in his hands. The contrast between the two women was staggering. The one he adored had tried to sell him out, and the one he ignored had used all her talent to protect him until the very end. Suddenly, the door opened. Chloe walked in, smiling, carrying a cup of coffee. "Honey, why were you so late?" She stopped when she saw Ethan's intense gaze. He said nothing, just pointed to the door and ordered security to enter. It was the first and last time Chloe saw the true ruthlessness of the man she thought she had wrapped around her finger. After turning Chloe over to the police with irrefutable evidence, Ethan returned home at sunset. The mansion by the river had never seemed so large and terrifying to him. There was no warm light waiting for him, no smell of food coming from the kitchen, only darkness and a chilling silence. His footsteps echoed on the floor, solitary and desolate. He wandered through the rooms like a ghost. The living room where I used to wait for him was now a cold space. The bedroom, once our sanctuary, was empty. My closet was completely bare, not a single dress, not a trace of my perfume. He opened my vanity drawer, where I used to keep the jewelry he gave me. It was empty, except for the red velvet box of my wedding ring, which lay there like a tomb for a dead marriage. Desperate to find any trace of me, he remembered the wine cellar. He descended the dark stairs, turned on the light, and saw that the vault door was slightly ajar, perhaps intentionally left that way by me. He entered and froze. For 3 years, he had lived unaware of the existence of that secret space in his own home. The safes were open and empty. On the table, only the appraisal report from the Geneva expert and the Swiss transfer receipts remained. The numbers made his breath catch. Diamonds, emeralds, bonds. A total value of hundreds of millions. He picked up the papers with a trembling hand. It turned out that the wife he considered a simple technician, who didn't know how to spend money and depended on him, was a magnate in the shadows, with a vast fortune. He remembered the times I refused to buy designer clothes, the times I wore the same dress to parties, the times I asked him to cut company expenses. He had laughed at my provincialism, my inability to enjoy life. Now he understood. I didn't need those whims to define my worth. I was 1,000 times richer than him, not only in money but in self-worth and character. Standing in the middle of the empty room, a feeling of inferiority and shame overwhelmed him. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost his pride as a man. Since I left, Ethan developed chronic insomnia. The luxurious mansion became a prison, tormenting him with memories. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw my image in the kitchen or my hunched back in front of the computer, fixing system errors for him. He feared the dark and the silence, so he took refuge in work, like a moth to a flame, trying to numb the pain with busyness. But ironically, my presence was even stronger in the office. Every time he turned on the computer, the software I created greeted him. Every line of code, every process, every financial report bore my mark. He couldn't erase it. It was the soul of the company. He lived and worked with the legacy I left him, like a beggar of the past. He hired the best private detectives, paying enormous sums to find me. Find her. I'll pay any price, he ordered, his voice broken by insomnia and alcohol. But all the reports ended with the same conclusion: no trace. I had prepared my escape meticulously. I changed my identity, used a foreign passport, moved between several countries, and erased all my digital footprints. I had vanished from the world. At night, Ethan would sit in my old office, the one Chloe had turned into a pink nest, which he had ordered restored to its original state. He would sit in my chair, caress the cold wood of the desk, and pour himself a straight whiskey. He would look out at the brightly lit city, millions of people, but the one he needed wasn't there. A sense of powerlessness enveloped him. He realized that money could buy information, but it couldn't find someone who didn't want to be found. He began to fear the sound of the phone, longing for a call with news of me, yet dreading it. He lived in a state of intense waiting, the same waiting I had endured for 10 years. Karma, sometimes, doesn't arrive like a storm but seeps in slowly, cold and persistent, like an endless rain. A year passed since I left. Time, like water between fingers, was both fast and slow. Far away, in another land, I slowly rebuilt a quiet life. Meanwhile, in the United States, I learned that a man remained trapped in the shadows of the past. Through the few mutual friends we maintained contact with, I learned that Ethan had lived that year like a zombie, becoming a working machine, locking himself in his office to escape the loneliness that engulfed him every night. One afternoon, while flipping through tech magazines in his office, his eyes fell on a small article. The news reported on a social innovation award in Europe, granted to an anonymous programmer from Spain. Her app helped visually impaired people identify obstacles through voice commands, a non-profit, deeply humane product. Although the article didn't publish her photo or her real name, only the pseudonym Alma, every one of her responses in the interview, intelligent, clear, and full of social commitment, made Ethan's heart beat faster. He recognized that way of writing, that way of thinking, her way of discussing technology not as cold algorithms but as a tool to bring warmth to the forgotten corners of society. It was the same philosophy I had told him about at the beginning of our relationship, before he was blinded by money. A powerful intuition told him that Alma was Amelia, the wife he was desperately searching for. Without a second thought, he called his secretary, his voice trembling with emotion. "Book me a ticket on the first flight to Europe. Cancel all my meetings this week. I have something more important than my own life to attend to." He left as if a thirsty man had found an oasis in the desert. In his luggage, besides a few clothes, was only the old photo of our wedding, which he had carefully laminated after finding it discarded in a storage box. He carried that fragile hope for thousands of miles, believing that if he could see me, he would have a chance to redeem himself. But he forgot that there are rivers that, once they reach the sea, never return to their source. Europe greeted Ethan with a cold drizzle and a gray sky, a reflection of his own state of mind. Using the address of the magazine's newsroom, he sought information, but the strict privacy policy, there was an insurmountable wall. The editor was polite but firm, rejecting all his pleas, even when he presented his business card as the CEO of a large group. They told him the author wished to maintain her anonymity, and they respected that. Not giving up, Ethan began to wander aimlessly through the city, visiting tech cafes, libraries, places he thought I would frequent. He walked for miles every day, his expensive leather shoes covered in mud, his face pale. Every time he saw a woman with long, dark hair, his heart would leap, and he would run towards her, only to be met with strange and confused looks. One time, sitting in a small cafe by the river, he saw through the rain-streaked glass a woman reading a book. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar to Ethan that his breath caught. He stood up, ran across the street, ignoring the blaring horns, and caught up to her. "Amelia, is that you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman stopped. Her face was completely unknown. She looked at him with confusion, and quickly walked away, thinking he was a stalker. Ethan remained standing in the rain, the drops mixing with his tears. Despair washed over him. He understood that fate was punishing his indifference in the cruelest way. Before, I was always by his side, but he never truly looked at me. Now that he wanted to see me, the world was too big, too vast to find me. He sat on a park bench, watching the golden leaves fall. He understood that the distance between us was no longer just geographical. We were in two different worlds. I had moved on. I had found my peace. He remained trapped in the winter of his regret. While Ethan was desperate in Europe, Chloe's trial took place in the United States. The case of embezzlement and industrial espionage at Quantum Dynamics was a media scandal. I wasn't there, but my lawyer represented me and kept me informed of everything. In the defendant's chair, Chloe no longer looked glamorous as she once did. She wore a prison uniform, her face pale and haggard. The evidence I left on the USB, along with the confessions of her accomplices, gave her no chance. Faced with the judge's questions, she admitted everything. The fake invoices, the bloated budgets, the spyware on Ethan's computer, and even more chilling, she confessed that her illnesses, her suicide attempts, and her accidents were all a charade to manipulate Ethan whenever he tried to get closer to me. "Do you regret anything?" the judge asked. Chloe looked up, her eyes cold, without a trace of remorse. I only regret being too impatient. If I had waited a little longer for him to transfer all his assets to me, I would be far away by now. Men are just like chess pieces." Her words caused a murmur of outrage in the courtroom. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge's gavel fell, ending the career of a woman consumed by greed. Ethan received the news by phone at the airport while waiting for his flight back. He felt no satisfaction or joy, only emptiness and a profound dread. The woman he had adored, for whom he had abandoned his suffering wife, was a venomous snake. He smiled bitterly. He had won the trial, he had imprisoned the traitor, but he had lost at life. A week after his return, Ethan received a package from a prestigious international law firm. Inside was a complete set of legal documents transferring all the intellectual property I had developed for quantum dynamics, which was then in my name, to the company. It was given completely and unconditionally. Along with the documents was a small card with a single handwritten line. "This is my way of cutting the last tie that binds us." I didn't want him to live with a sense of debt or guilt for using my work. I was giving everything back to him so he could move on with dignity, and so I could live in peace, without any attachments. Ethan read that sentence hundreds of times until the letters blurred. He understood that I wasn't just giving him a material gift. I was teaching him to let go. My kindness and forgiveness hurt him even more. If I had hated him, if I had insulted him, perhaps he would have felt better. But I chose to leave with a kindness that became cruel. That kindness was an invisible wall that prevented him from continuing to search for me. He put the card in a drawer with my wedding ring and the few memories he had left of me. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He understood that loving someone sometimes means not possessing them, but respecting their decisions. I had chosen freedom, and the best he could do was not to be a burden in my new life. He closed his eyes, and a single hot tear rolled down his cheek. He realized that the quantum dynamics empire he was so proud of was built on the foundation of my talent and sacrifice. Now that I had returned everything to him, he felt he didn't deserve to be there. One morning, Ethan called an extraordinary board meeting. He entered the room without a computer or documents, only a single piece of paper in his hand. His resignation. "Gentlemen, today I inform you of my decision to step down as CEO of the group." There were murmurs of surprise. An elderly board member stood up. "Ethan, what are you doing? The company has just stabilized. You are the soul of the group." Ethan smiled sadly. "The soul of this group left a long time ago. I am just an empty shell clinging to a glorious past. I will keep my shares, but the management should be in the hands of someone with a bigger heart and a broader vision than mine." In the following days, Ethan began to hand over his responsibilities. He abandoned the parties and business trips. He sold part of his shares and, with the money, secretly established a charitable foundation, the All-Mate Foundation. The foundation was dedicated to providing scholarships to underprivileged computer science students, especially women, and to equipping schools in rural areas. He hoped that somewhere, talented young people like me could achieve their dreams without having to sacrifice their careers as I did. With every donation he signed, he felt his heart lighten slightly, as if sending a final apology into the wind, hoping it would reach me. While Ethan was searching for me in the noisy cities of Europe, I was living a quiet life in a small coastal town in Maine, full of sun and wind, no skyscrapers or traffic noise, only the whisper of the waves. I rented a white house with a veranda full of bougainvillea and a small garden. I no longer woke up to an alarm clock but to the sun. I didn't wear suits but linen dresses. My job no longer had a pompous title. In the afternoons, I gave free programming classes to the town's children. The rest of the time, I worked as a freelancer for several international NGOs. The money was enough for a simple and fulfilling life. I found joy in the simplest things: a home-cooked meal, a walk on the beach, listening to the stories of the village elders under the moon. For the first time in 10 years, I felt I was truly living. I was no longer the queen of a technological empire, nor the betrayed wife. I was just Amelia, a free woman who loved herself and cherished every moment. The painful past had faded, leaving only lessons that had made me stronger. Fate has unexpected turns. One autumn day, the town's mayor ran to my house. "Amelia, This afternoon, a foundation from the capital is coming to donate a computer lab for your class. 20 new computers. I smiled, happy for the children. I didn't know that behind that foundation was Ethan. His foundation, Almate, had chosen my small school for their most important project of the year. That afternoon, a white van stopped in front of the town square. I was in class, teaching the children. Ethan got out of the vehicle. He was wearing a white shirt and dark pants. He looked older, calmer. As he toured the facility with the mayor, his steps faltered as he passed by my classroom. From the cracked wooden window, he heard a clear, warm voice explaining an algorithm. You see, children, a computer is like life. If the input data is wrong, the result won't be right. To fix an error, you have to go to the root of the problem. That voice, though distant in time, was engraved in his memory. His heart raced. He turned and looked through the window. The afternoon light streamed in, illuminating my profile as I stood in front of the blackboard. My hair was short, loose, I wore a simple blouse, and my face had a peaceful smile. It was the smile he had fallen in love with 10 years ago, the same smile he had killed. Now, that smile was reborn, brighter than ever, but not for him. Ethan remained motionless, his hand on the window frame, not taking his eyes off me. He almost went in, almost shouted my name, but he stopped. He saw the joy in my eyes as I ruffled the hair of a child who had solved a problem. He saw the peace that radiated from me. If he entered, he would shatter that peace I had fought so hard to find. He understood that I was happy in my new life, a life without him. Loving someone sometimes means letting them go. It means wishing them peace from a distance. Ethan stepped back and whispered to his assistant, "You go in on my behalf and deliver the equipment. I'll wait in the car. Don't tell anyone I was here." Before leaving, he carefully placed a bouquet of white daisies he had brought on the windowsill of my classroom. When the ceremony was over, I saw the bouquet of flowers. I froze. In this corner of the coast, those flowers didn't grow. Their familiar scent awakened a dormant memory. I looked at the dirt road and saw the white van driving away. Through the tinted glass, I thought I saw the shadow of a man looking back, just for a moment. But my heart trembled, not with pain or nostalgia, but with understanding. I knew it was him. He had seen me but chose not to disturb my peace. The bouquet was his apology and his farewell. I smiled, feeling light. I hugged the flowers, inhaling the scent of a past that had finally closed. The sea breeze ruffled my hair, carrying the smell of salt and eternal freedom. I turned and walked towards the children, whose laughter filled the air. Life goes on, each on their own path. He had his career and his regrets to learn from. I had the vast sky and peace in my soul. That, and nothing else, was the perfect ending for us. True happiness comes only when we learn to let go of the past, so the soul can be free and serene, like the vast sea under an open sky.